Welcome back to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. I'm Ollie Hayes, and today's video is inside Everton's new stadium, bringing you my thoughts and reaction to the 25,000 attendance test event at Bramley Moore this afternoon. So, just going to get straight into it with my sort of reaction, my experience, and everything that I was thinking throughout the day. This test event at Bramley Moore, obviously the second test event at Bramley Moore after the first one against Wigan Athletic under 18s, but obviously this one coming against Bolton B team. But I'll get into that later on in the video talking about the football, but we'll start with my journey into the ground, into the game itself. A very busy journey on Merseyrail. Obviously, as you know, it was a Sunday game, so a Sunday service on the Southport line meant that it was every half an hour for the train, so it was very busy. It was packed, especially going through stations such as Blundersand and Crosby, for example. I think they were real hotspots for fans getting onto the train going towards the ground, and then obviously getting off towards Sandhills. I did see a lot of videos over on X about other issues and videos of fans at Sandhill Station itself. A lot of issues there, packed platforms. I actually got off at Moorfields myself because I wanted to sort of test the walk from town, sort of go for a few drinks before the game, go for a bit of food before the game, and test the walk from town towards Bramley Moore itself. So that's why I got off at Moorfields, which is sort of a hotspot for Castle Street rather than the ground itself. But seeing a lot of videos on X about the issues at Sandhills platform, especially with sort of a backlog of fans getting off trains and then the next train coming in, so fans wouldn't be able to get off the train itself. So I think there was a few issues before the game. Maybe it was a little bit of a lack of foresight going into this game with obviously 25,000 attendance going into it. But we'll start with my journey from town and walking down that dot road. I think you walk around the corner from the dot road and you see the stadium instantly. As soon as you walk around the corner, you see it, and looking up at that ground, it was an absolutely incredible view of the south stand from there. You don't actually realize, in my opinion, how big it is until you actually see it in person. I think a lot of people are underestimating the size of Bramley Moore itself. But obviously, as I said before, walking past Costco and walking past Toys R Us, going towards the south stand there, the sheer size of the ground is absolutely insane when you're walking towards it. But also, when I was stood in the plaza itself, obviously you come through the dock walls, which is a big brick wall. I think that's actually a listed building. But you go through those walls with tickets being checked on the outside of the wall, and then you're in the fan plaza, which there's a lot of food stalls. There's a lot of there's some outside entertainment. I think that will obviously be ramped up when we get full capacity and we get obviously a Premier League game in there. But there was a lot going on today in that fan plaza. It was obviously very busy. I think I got in there with about 30, 40 minutes before kickoff, and even then it was very busy. So I think it's good to see that we are getting obviously food stalls, but also entertainment on the outside of the ground. I think it's good to keep fans engaged, and obviously, we're sort of leaning towards that thing of the commercial thing of having a match day, not just as the 90 minutes on the pitch. It's an experience you want fans to experience around the ground, and I think having food stalls and obviously entertainment outside the ground definitely helps with that. But I think it's the same with the concourse as well. Obviously, I was talking about the sheer size of the ground, looking up from the fan plaza, looking around the concourse of that south stand. I was actually block 206, which is where my season ticket is going to be, but I was block 206 for today's test event. And in the concourse, I think it's a massive upgrade, obviously, from the Upper Gladys is what I'm used to. Obviously, I'm a big lad. Being in the Upper Gladys, it's a little bit like being in the attic up there. Not a lot of space, especially in the toilets and places like that. So to have the upgrade of the concourse at Bramley Moore, I think it was a huge plus. I think it was absolutely fantastic. The amount of space you've actually got in that concourse, I think obviously with the test event being just the south stand, and I think it was the east and parts of the west stand, and then also parts of the north stand as well. I don't think it was obviously wasn't full capacity, but I think the south stand was probably the most full stand in terms of the capacity. So I think, but based on today's assessment, I think the concourse is, obviously as it was near full capacity in that south stand, I think the concourse is fit for purpose. I think there's a lot of space to move around. There's a lot of space to stand. There's not massive queues for food and drink. I didn't actually try any of the food and drink myself. Well, obviously I had a beer whilst I was in the concourse, but we'll get to that in a minute. But in that concourse, I think the size of the concourse, I think, is absolutely fantastic. And then we have to talk about that view of the skyline of the city. Being in that south stand, standing with a beer at half time and looking out towards the skyline of the city from that south stand was, I think it shows that how the infrastructure and the sort of the architecture that Dan Mace has provided. I think it just shows in person how good it actually was, because seeing the city, the skyline, and that south stand was absolutely fantastic. But as I said before, didn't try any of the food and drink really. Just wanted to get into my seat really. And talking about my seat, I think it's absolutely incredible where I was sat, block 206. I think I was row 40. I think a lot of people maybe thought that towards the back of the south stand would be quite difficult to see the pitch. I wasn't obviously too far back, but being row 40, I feel like I was kind of that middle ground. But my view was absolutely fantastic. I think pictures don't really do it justice. You probably obviously see a lot of pictures on X, and also on this video, you'll see a lot of pictures, but I don't think these pictures and videos do it justice, because I think it's so steep, but I think pictures make it look like it's so zoomed out, when in reality I was row 40. I felt like I was massively on top of the pitch. I felt like I could feel the atmosphere from the lower of the south stand, but also I think being that steep, I think it is massively advantageous for feeling like you're on top of the pitch. But no doubt we do get a full stadium, we get a full capacity ground for the first Premier League game. It's going to be an absolutely fantastic atmosphere. There was a few murmurs of chants in the South Stand today. There was a couple of ones when we scored our goal to go 1-0 up. But again, I'll go into the game itself in a little later in this video. But I can just feel the atmosphere already. I think it's going to be an absolutely fantastic stand, that South Stand. I'm lucky enough to have my season ticket in that South Stand. So fingers crossed that atmosphere is going to be absolutely fantastic. But no doubt it will be with a full capacity Bramley Moore Stadium. But we'll move on to the game itself now. Obviously, not a lot to shout about. I think the game was only 65 minutes long, obviously with the fire alarm and the Operation Everton Stadium taking place. Obviously, we have to get those kind of regulations, and we have to get those kind of tests in place for obviously all the test certificates and things like that going into obviously a full capacity ground. So it's good to get that out of the way now. It's good to get those tests out of the way. And obviously, as we know, it is a test event, so these things are likely to happen. But as I said before, only about 65 minutes of a game. But the game itself, I thought the under-21s gave a good account of themselves, especially in that first half. Bolton had a lot of first team players playing in that game. Obviously, had Kyle Dempsey, Rico Santos, the centre half, amongst some other players for Bolton. So they did have a few first teamers out, which they're looking to get back to full fitness. But in terms of our under-21s, I think they did really give a good account of themselves. Obviously, you look in comparison to games like that the under-21s play in Premier League 2, for example. This one was a little bit more of a test, obviously, as I said before, with the amount of first teamers that Bolton had playing. But as I said before, they gave a good account of themselves. The ones I was impressed with really was obviously Braden Graham. I think he was energetic. I think he was he was creating chances wherever he could. Amari Benjamin off that left hand side, I thought he had a very good first half, and then obviously Kingsford Boakia, who was the goal scorer. Late on in the game, shall we say, obviously it was only on 60 minutes or so, but late on in the game, Kingsford Boakia scoring a good header from close range. They were my standouts, really. I think Boakia coming onto the pitch, I think he had a relatively decent cameo. So the game itself, I thought obviously the under-21s gave a great account of themselves. Not much to write home about in terms of quality or massive things going on in the game, but it was an interesting one to watch. And obviously Bolton's first team is playing, the under-21s playing. I think it was a real good test for our under-21s, and long may it continue in Premier League 2 for them. But there's another sort of aspect I want to talk about in terms of the new stadium. I touched on it briefly at the start of this video. It was obviously the travel to and from the game. My personal experience of travel to the game, it wasn't too difficult. I think obviously where I got on the Southport line, it was relatively early on in that line. So I think, I can't really speak for fans that are coming from other sides of the city and different lines like the Ormskirk line or the Headbolt Lane line, for example. But my personal experience moving obviously from where I live to the ground, I think it was relatively easy. Obviously, as I said before, it was quite busy with it being a Sunday service every 30 minutes for the train. It was quite busy, but I think the majority of what Everton have done in terms of what they've done on site at Bramley Moore, I think has been absolutely fantastic. I think they've managed it really well. Obviously, coming out of the game with the Operation Everton Stadium, shall we call it? Obviously, the fire drill which had to take place. I think there was a little bit of a bottleneck coming out of the South Stand. Obviously, I do think that's kind of attributed to the fact that Everton Way isn't finished yet. I think that's not fully constructed yet. So I think once that's open and people can walk around the fences that they've got constructed rather than being bottlenecked into some little alleyway out of the South Stand, I think that will massively help. But apart from that, I do think Everton have got a lot of things right on site at Bramley Moore. I think the South Stand was obviously quite tight in the concourse, but I think they have done it very well. I think they've managed to utilize the space very, very well. So a massive pat on the back for Everton for that one. But we have to talk about Liverpool City Council and Merseyrail. I think the only thing obviously coming out of the dock walls is because you have to funnel out onto the main streets. But I think the way Liverpool City Council have set it up, there's a small bridge near the Titanic Hotel where I think there's a weight restriction. So they have stewards with stop go lollipops, which I think. We see it in so many modern grounds now. At Tottenham Hotspur, they have it. At West Ham, they have it. Those with a good distant memory will know that they have it on Wembley Way. Obviously, we haven't been there since 2015, so a few of the younger audience might not understand what I'm talking about. But Wembley Way obviously have that stop go lollipop system. So again, I think we kind of do just have to expect it. It does make it kind of difficult coming out of the side streets from Bramley Moore when, if people are trying to funnel towards town and you have a big backlog. I think that backlog then goes into the dock walls because obviously you can't have too many with it. I think that they are listed. You can't have too much construction for the dock walls. But that being said, walking out of the ground itself, I think was relatively stress-free. But obviously, a lot of people that were at the test event will know the disruption with the Southport line on Merseyrail. And a lot of people will have seen the videos, pictures of sandhills after the game and also before the game. I personally think we have to talk about the council's contribution to proceedings here. I think they do leave a lot to be desired. I think Sandhills clearly isn't fit for purpose. I think we've known for a long, long time that Bramley Moore is going to be a 55,000 seater stadium, and to have Sandhills with one exit and one entrance into the stadium, I just don't think it's sufficient. I think there's backlogs of trains pre-match and then post-match as well. A small queuing system in the car park just isn't sufficient for me. The amount of fans that are going to be travelling through that network, it's going to be very, very busy. And for a 25,000 test event, for the amount of people that were queuing round the corner at Sandhills, I think emphasises the issue today. To add insult to injury, Merseyrail's pre-match statement urging people to walk from town rather than getting trains or using public transport, I think adds insult to injury. I think it just shows that they're not fit for purpose and that they're not putting the sufficient measures into place. See, there was various talk at the start of this week from Steve Rotherham and Liverpool City Council that a bridge was going to be installed at Sandhills. I'm not really too sure how that's going to help. Obviously, as we know, there is one exit and one entrance to Sandhills. Obviously, with it being a platform that's in the middle of two tracks, you have to come up through a stairwell or a lift. So I'm not sure how a bridge is going to help that. I hope that Steve Rotherham will put sufficient measures in place for a full capacity event, because I personally think at the moment it's bordering on unsafe. I think it's very inconvenient at the moment. Obviously, a lot of fans will want to be travelling to and from Bramley Moore Stadium using public transport. That's, obviously with everything that's going on with the parking system and the parking permit system around the stadium, I think a lot of fans will be looking to utilise the public transport and the decent links that North Liverpool and South Liverpool have on Merseyrail. But I think at the moment it's inconvenient, it's insufficient, and it's bordering on unsafe. It only takes one moment to have a real big accident at Sandhills, and I do trust that Steve Rotherham and Liverpool City Council will put the correct measures in place going into a full capacity event, because at the moment I think it's bordering on unfit for purpose in my opinion. But it brings a little bit of an argument with, obviously, you're looking at recent news with Manchester United Stadium, for example, the subsequent regeneration of that area, regeneration of Trafford Park, and then obviously Manchester United getting a new stadium at the heart of that regeneration project. Whether this, is it a little bit unfair that Everton haven't really been given much funding, or Liverpool City Council haven't been given much funding for the surrounding area of Bramley Moore? Obviously, Manchester United have been promised, large amounts of money and large amounts of funding for the regeneration project of Salford and Trafford Park for their new stadium. But where's this funding been for Bramley Moore? Again, does it bring us back to this financial fair play argument? Manchester United have massively overspent in recent seasons. Are they going to be hit with a points deduction in the next 3 years for their overspending regarding their stadium? I'm not so sure they will be. Again, it just brings us back to this argument. I'm not trying to get all political and start talking about the Premier League once again, but it does beg belief, and it does raise an interesting question regarding that. But again, as we know, Everton were deducted 8 points largely surrounding our stadium payments. So whether the same force will be met with Manchester United, I'm not so sure. But also, I feel like the same amount of funding from the government needs to come for Bramley Moore, because at the moment, as I said before, with Sandhills, the regeneration of that needs to happen sooner rather than later, because, as I said before, it's kind of unfit for purpose in my opinion. But more does need to be done at government level and also the local council. I think we do risk getting into a situation where there is a big accident happen at Sandhills, and even at Moorfields, for example, the trains on the way back from Moorfields were left a lot to be desired because there was a lot of delays, there was a lot of cancellations. I myself, I walked up to Moorfields from the stadium just to try and let the crowds die down a little bit and then get on the train and sort of travel back. But even then, it was disrupted. There was a lot of delays and a lot of cancellations. So it does leave a lot to be desired. I think I'm kind of trying to get out of the negative spiral because I know it is a test event. That's what these test events are for. But I think a lot needs to be done sooner rather than later to try and rectify this system because, one thing, you've got a lot of Everton fans going to and from the game, 19 Premier League games next season to and from Bramley Moore. That needs to be sorted. But also in the little bit further future, you've got Euro 2028 and Everton being a potential hosting stadium for Euro 2028. I'm not so sure UEFA will be too happy if there isn't correct measures put in place and correct provisions put in place for decent transport to and from the stadium. You look at Germany, for example, and their hosting of Euro 2024. It was completely seamless. There was a lot of fantastic infrastructure for Germany for Euro 2024. I myself, I went to Dusseldorf, and that's a very sort of similar infrastructure kind of stadium for Everton. And, I see a lot of similarities between Dusseldorf Stadium and Everton Stadium. So, and me personally, when I went to Dusseldorf for the Euros, it was completely seamless. The transport, it was fantastic. There was trams, there was trains waiting to get rid of people from the stadium, and there was little to no queues there. So I think a lot, needs to be done in obviously the next year, 18 months, 2 years, not just for Evertonians, but also in anticipation of Euro 2028 coming to the UK, and obviously with Everton being a potential hosting stadium of that. But that is all really regarding the test event. Sorry to end it on a little bit of more of a negative note surrounding the infrastructure and the council's contributions to proceedings today, but I think the key takeaways of it is the stadium's absolutely fantastic. A lot of Evertonians that weren't lucky enough to go hang tight blues. It's going to be an absolutely fantastic experience once you do get in there. The South Stand, if you are sat in that South Stand, it's very steep, but I think the atmosphere is going to be absolutely fantastic. And I think we're all just looking forward to getting into that first game at Bramley Moore as a Premier League team and just getting behind the lads and feeling that atmosphere because I think it's going to be absolutely fantastic. But if you did go to the test event, let me know all your thoughts in the comments about what your experiences were like. Obviously, I'm kind of talking about my experiences with the travel, and that might be negative compared to someone else's that you might have had a really positive experience with the travel. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Obviously, it's an open book. Let me know all your thoughts. And if you didn't go to the test event, if you've got any questions that I can hopefully answer in the comments, let me know on that as well. But that is all from me today. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and I'll speak to you soon.